Hello Fanatics, welcome to Diamond Painting Fanatics. Today is Thursday, which means we have a true crime story to share with you. You may notice that I am time-lapsing. I time-lapse several projects and then I'll be working on my canvas that I'm working on now. So I hope you enjoy. And yeah, have you heard of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake? This is the episode we're going to be talking about today. I came across this in one of the crime shows I binged watched and it got my attention. It's with all my Thriller Thursdays, viewer discretion is advised because some of it may be a little brutal. Okay, so Charles Ng was born in British Hong Kong and he was the son of a wealthy executive and his wife. As a child, Charles was harshly disciplined and abused by his dad. As a teenager, he was described as a troubled loner and was expelled from several schools. He had fought hard against his family's expectations. Yeah, could say that. I'm pretty sure they didn't have this planned out for him. After his arrest for shoplifting at the age of 15, he went at his father's insistence to a grammar school, which was a boarding school in North Yorkshire in England. Not long after arriving, Charles was expelled for stealing from other students and returned to Hong Kong. He then moved to the United States on a student visa in 1978 and studied biology at the College of Notre Dame in Belmont, California. He dropped out after one semester. I mean, this lad is screaming trouble, isn't he, already? Soon after, he was involved in a hit-and-run accident, and to avoid prosecution, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Nice guy. So then in October 1979, he joined the United States Marine Corps, and with the help he claimed of a recruiting sergeant and false documents attesting to his birthplace as Indiana. While stationed at MCAS, I can't even pronounce that, but in Hawaii, Charles showed signs of anger and resentment and had problems with authority figures. I mean, he's already showing that, so he's not really showing signs now, is he? Swig of tea, guys. Oh, that's not very nice. Carl made that. Ugh. Okay, so don't tell him. So despite this, he was eventually promoted to Lance Corporal. After less than a year of service, he was arrested by military police for stealing automatic weapons from the base armory. Facing court, he escaped custody in 1980 and made his way back to Northern California, where he met Leonard Lake. Here we go. In 1982, federal authorities raided the mobile home they shared in, I can't even pronounce these places, They raided the home that they shared, seizing a large stash of illegal weapons and explosive. Leonard was released on bond, but he jumped bail and became a fugitive and hid out at a remote cabin owned by his wife, Clara Lynn, in the foothills of the I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Sierra Nevada mountains, approximately 150 miles east of San Francisco. Charles was returned to the Marines' custody and pleaded guilty to theft and being AWOL charges. Under the terms of his plea deal, he was paroled and dishonourably discharged in 1984 after serving 18 months in the military stockade in the United States disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. Wow, these guys are so nice. After his release from Leavenworth prison, Charles rejoined Leonard Lake, who was still living at the cabin. By that time, Leonard Lake and Clara Lynn had divorced, but they had remained on good terms with each other, with Clara Lynn living in San Bruno. Next to the cabin, Leonard had built a structure described in his journals as a dungeon. He had probably already murdered his brother Donald and his friend and best man Charles Gunner, stealing their money and Gunner's identity. Over the next year, Leonard and Charles began a pattern of rape, torture and murder. Their victims included their neighbour Lonnie Bond, their neighbour's girlfriend Brenda O'Connor, Lonnie Jr., the Bonds' infant son, Harvey Dubbs, Deborah Dubbs, and their young son Sean. Other victims were Paul Cosner, Randy Jacobson, Mike Carroll, Kathy Allen, Jeff Gerald, Charles Gunner, Robin Stapley, and Clifford something. Can't pronounce it. Wow, what a list. According to court records, they killed the men and infants immediately, but kept the women alive, raping and torturing them before murdering them or allowing them to die from their injuries. Other known victims included relatives and friends who came looking for Bond and O'Connor, two gay men, and even Leonard's own brother Donald, whom he thought to have lured to the cabin and shot to death in his sleep in 1983. Charles Gunner's body was unearthed from the property in 1998. This is shocking. The FBI estimates that their kidnapping and killing spree started within a month of Charles's release from Leavenworth. In July 1984, Don, a San Francisco disc jockey, and his roommate Richard were shot by an Asian man who broke into their apartment and robbed them. Richard died in the attack. Don died in the attack, but Richard survived and later identified Charles Ng as his assailant. Soon afterwards, Charles managed to get a job at Bay Area Moving Company. The duo's rampage might have gone on longer if it were not for Charles's kleptomania. For those of you who don't know, kleptomania is the how to word it, you can't resist the urge to steal, which he showed in his teenage years. Like, he was stealing from everybody around him, wasn't he? But it's like an OCD type thing. You can't resist the urge to steal, but that's what kleptomania means. On June the 2nd, 1985, Leonard and Charles entered the South City lumber store in South San Francisco. An employee observed Charles stealing a $75 vise and called the police. When confronted by the employee, Charles tossed the vise into the trunk of a 1980 Honda in the parking lot, then fled on foot. The police arrived minutes later. An officer looked into the car's trunk and saw the stolen vise along with a .22 caliber pistol equipped with an illegal silencer. Leonard exited the store and explained to the officers that there was a misunderstanding and that he had paid for the vise. Leonard was arrested for the illegally modified weapon and taken to the South San Francisco police station. You won't believe what happens next. The officer noticed that Leonard bore no resemblance to the photo on his California's driver's license, which showed the name of Robin Scott Stapley, a San Diego man who was reported missing by his family several weeks earlier. When the officer ran a check on the Honda's vehicle identification number, he discovered it was registered to Paul Cosner, who had disappeared from San Francisco on the 2nd of November 1984, after leaving his apartment to show the car to someone who was interested in purchasing it. Paul Cosner had been reported missing by his sister within days of his disappearance, and the car's license plate was checked and it showed as being registered to another missing person. Okay, so what did they check then? Oh, the identification number, not the reg. Okay. When the car's license plate was checked, it showed as being registered to another missing person, Lonnie Bond. The gun, as it turned out, was registered to Stapley. While in custody, Leonard Lake admitted his real identity to the officers, and he offered to give a statement about the illegal weapon. He also gave police the name of his shoplifting accomplice, Charles Ng. Leonard then asked for a pencil, a piece of paper, and a glass of water. As the officer left the room to go get that, he swallowed a cyanide capsule that he had hidden in his jacket. And when they came back, he'd left a note to his ex-wife. Believing that Lake was having a heart attack or a seizure, police called for an ambulance. Lake was rushed to a nearby hospital and was found to be brain dead and placed on a life support system. On June the 6th, doctors removed Leonard from his life support system and he was pronounced dead. I don't like that word, but in this case, I'll make an exception. Upon further examination of the Honda, investigators found a bullet hole in the car's roof, along with a blood splatter, a stun gun, and several unspent bullets. Under the passenger seat, a utility bill in the name of Leonard's ex-wife, Clara Lynn, with a the address of the cabin was found on it. On the morning of Tuesday, June the 4th, 2 San Francisco police detectives accompanied county sheriff's investigators to the cabin. Clara Lynn had voluntarily allowed them to search the property. Upon entering the cabin, they discovered video equipment in one of the bedrooms, as well as a bed with holes drilled into the posts as if they were used to tie up and restrain someone to the bed. Serial numbers on the video equipment indicated it belonged to Harvey Dobbs, who had vanished from his San Francisco apartment along with his wife Deborah and their infant son Sean in July 1984. Investigators also found vehicles belonging to Lonnie Bond and Scott Stapley parked on the property. Lonnie, as it turned out, rented a house just 50 yards from Leonard's cabin with his girlfriend Brenda O'Connor and their infant son Lonnie Bond Jr. I can't remember Stapley's name. They use surnames and I don't like doing that because it kind of distances it, if you like. Okay, but Stapley, I can't remember his name, but Stapley, a friend of Lonnie's, had also been staying at the house. Detectives found the house empty and their rent had not been paid for several months. According to a friend of Brenda's, Leonard had invited Lonnie and Brenda to come over and watch pornographic videotapes with him, and that they refused, and Brenda became fearful of Leonard. I should think so. He's very, very creepy. Next to the driveway stood a cinder block bunker that had been constructed by Leonard. In his teenage years, Leonard had read a 1963 John Fowles novel called The Collector, which tells the story of a young man who captures a young woman named Miranda, and keeps her as a slave in the hopes that she would eventually fall in love with him. Can't just ask someone out, can we? Dearie me. Leonard was fascinated by this novel and had used the book as a platform to launch what he called Operation Miranda. Inside the bunker, investigators found a copy of The Collector, as well as tools, handcuffs, women's clothing and makeup. Posted on a wall was a list of typewritten rules for a female captive to follow, along with the pictures of 21 women, some of them nude. Behind one wall, equipped with a hidden door, was a tiny windowless cell with a small mattress and a bucket which may have been used as a toilet. Investigators believed that women had been held in the cell as Leonard's prisoners. In a makeshift burial site, police unearthed roughly 45 pounds of burned and crushed human bone fragments corresponding to a minimum of 11 bodies. They also found a hand-drawn treasure map leading them to two buried 5-gallon buckets. One contained envelopes with names and victims' IDs, suggesting that the total number of victims might have been as high as 25. In the other bucket were Leonard's handwritten journals for the years 1983 and 1984, and 2 videotapes documenting the torture of 2 of their victims. On one of the tapes, labelled M Ladies, Charles Ng was seen telling victim Brenda O'Connor as he cuts her shirt off with a knife, quote, "You can cry and stuff like the rest of them, but it won't do you any good. We are pretty cold-hearted, so to speak," end quote. In another part of the tape, Kathy Allen is seen seated in a chair with Leonard Lake warning her, quote, "If you don't go along with us, we'll probably take you to the bed, tie you down, rape you, shoot you, and bury you," end quote. In the other, Deborah Dubbs is shown being assaulted so severely that she, quote, "could not have survived." Oh my God. I didn't realise, I mean, I knew it was bad, but... Charles Ng, meanwhile, was on the run. After fleeing the lumberyard on foot, he arrived at Clara Lynn's residence and told her that he had to leave town immediately. Clara Lynn drove Charles to San Francisco International Airport, where he boarded a flight bound for Chicago using the alias Mike Kimoto. A friend of Charles's drove him from Chicago to Detroit and crossed the border into Canada, where authorities were aware that Charles's sister lived. He eventually arrived in Calgary, Alberta. He lived undetected in a lean-to in Fish Creek Park until his penchant for theft did him in yet again. On July 6, 1985, he was arrested by the Calgary Police Service after shooting security guard Sean Doyle in the hand while resisting arrest for stealing a can of salmon from the Hudson's Bay department store. A can of salmon. He was charged and in December 1985 was subsequently convicted of shoplifting, assault with a weapon, and possession of a concealed firearm, and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. After serving his sentence, he remained incarcerated, pending on an extradition request from California authorities. Charles fought a protracted legal battle against the extradition. Is that how you say it? They want to take him out of there and back to the place where he committed the crimes. Extradition. On the grounds that Canada does not have the death penalty, would be violating the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms by permitting him to stand trial in California for capital murder. An appeal and a petition to the Alberta Court of Appeal were both denied. On September 26, 1991, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled by a vote of 4-3 against him, and Charles was put on an airplane and extradited back to California less than an hour after the ruling. They were waiting for him. They were ready to bring him back. Charles was indicted on 12 counts of first-degree murder. After a change of venue to Orange County, he initiated a protracted series of pre-trial motions. He sued the state over his temporary detainment at Folsom Prison, where he was caught hiding maps, fake IDs, and other escape paraphernalia, and filed charges against 4 of the judges assigned to his case. Is this guy for real? He lodged a long series of complaints regarding the strength of his eyeglass, the temperature of his food, and the right to his right to practice origami, paper folding, in his jail cell. I mean, is this guy for real? Charles went through a total of 10 attorneys, some of whom ended up defending him a second time. He also filed a malpractice suit against several of the attorneys, citing incompetent representation. After claiming that he had lost trust and confidence in all of his lawyers, he was allowed to represent himself, which delayed the trial another year while he researched applicable laws. I mean, seriously. His trial finally began in October 1998, 7 years after his after they pulled him out of Canada. Yeah. Leonard Lake's wife, Clara Lynn, cooperated with investigators and received legal immunity from prosecution. Brave move. Court records stated that Clara Lynn turned over weapons and other material to authorities during the investigation. Clara Lynn was called as a key witness in Charles Ng's trial in 1999. Charles' lawyer, William Kelly, in a surprise move, dismissed Clara Lynn without asking any questions. Kelly later declined to explain his actions. Clara Lynn was on the witness stand for a few minutes as Kelly read sections of her immunity agreement. Clara Lynn was expected to shed light on what happened inside the mountain cabin that her parents owned. Despite the video evidence and information in Leonard's diaries, and there's quite a lot of information in there, Charles maintained that he was merely an observer and that Leonard planned and committed all of the kidnappings, rapes and murders unassisted. Yeah, sure, that's gonna wash. He further maintained that he was dependent upon Leonard for direction, that the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father was a mitigating factor, and that his good behaviour behind bars showed that he could be imprisoned for life rather than executed. Psychiatrist Stuart Gracian testified that Charles had dependent personality disorder, but admitted under cross-examination that he had not viewed the tapes that showed Charles participating in the crimes. Probably a good job. Clinical psychologist Abraham agreed with the diagnosis of dependent personality disorder, and that Charles's behaviour in the tapes indicated that he was attempting to mirror, quote, and please Leonard. 4 prison guards, 2 sheriff deputies, a prison library employee, and a prison counsellor all testified that Charles was a model prisoner. 4 former Marines who had known Charles while he was serving in the Marine Corps testified that he was quiet and well behaved. Charles' parents both testified about his troubled childhood and expressed remorse for their son's actions. Charles insisted on taking the stand in his own defence, which allowed prosecutors to introduce additional evidence that helped define Charles's role in all aspects of the crime. One significant item was a photo of Charles in his prison cell, with cartoons he had sketched of his victims hanging on the wall behind him. One of the key witnesses against Charles never testified. While imprisoned in Canada for the 1985 shoplifting and assault case, Charles had allegedly confessed to a fellow inmate, Maurice LeBurge, that he had killed the cabin victims. But Maurice died in a car accident just north of Calgary, Alberta on May the 19th in 1998 before he could be called to testify. At one point during the trial, Charles had somehow managed to obtain the phone number of one of the jurors and contacted the juror at home in an unsuccessful attempt to cause a mistrial. In February 1999, Charles Ng was convicted of 11 of the 12 homicides, 6 men, 3 women, 2 male infants. Jurors found him not guilty on the 12th charge, the murder of Paul Cosner, despite the fact that Leonard and Charles had driven Cosner's car for the 7 months since he went missing in November 1984, and Paul Cosner's California driver's license had been found at the cabin. Charles was sentenced to death, and the presiding judge rejected a motion to reduce the jury's verdict to life imprisonment. Good. Quote, Mr. Charles Ng was not under any duress, nor does the evidence support that he was under the domination of Leonard Lake. End quote. Charles' prosecution cost the state of California approximately $20 million, at the time the most expensive trial in the state's history. As of July 2019, Charles remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. No executions have taken place in California since 2006. So there you go, you guys. I did warn you that it would be quite a story. I saw this, I can't remember what it was, which crime show, because I've watched quite a few, and I can't remember which one this was, but it got my attention because had he not been caught stealing the vice, if he'd have just kept his hands in his pockets, so to speak, he wouldn't have been caught that time, and he would have killed a lot more people. And I mean, he had convictions for burglary, rape, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and murder, death by lethal injection. He was convicted for 11. I would have put Paul Cosner on him, but he was convicted of 11, but suspected of 25. Between 1983 and 1985. I mean, that's bad. And he was apprehended on July 6, 1985. That's the only reason he stopped. So yeah, that is the story of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this story? Because unbelievable. They turned up at this cabin and something wasn't quite sitting right, and they started they started carefully digging around in the yard and came across all the bodies. I mean, he killed children, like really young children, just because they were there and an inconvenience. Pretty sick duo. Although I think even without meeting Leonard Lake, Charles was on this path. Let's see if we can pull up Leonard Lake's childhood. Leonard Lake. Cool, he looks even more unsavoury. Leonard Lake, when he was 6 years old, his parents separated, and he and his siblings moved in with their maternal grandmother. He was reportedly a bright child, but after habitually photographing his sister's nude, he was not going to end up well either, was he? Which his grandmother apparently encouraged. He became obsessed with pornography. He reportedly extorted his sisters to perform sexual acts, and he also collected mice and killed them by dissolving them in chemicals. In the same manner, he would later dispose of his human victims. Wow. He's like disgusting. And he got married. I mean, there's hope for me yet, isn't there? And then, in this little side note here, born Leonard Thomas Lake, 1945. He died June the 6th, 1985. So a month later they caught Charles. Interesting. Suicide by cyanide poisoning. And then it says other names that he's known by: Paul Cosner, Charles Gunner, Robin Stapley, Randy Jacob. They're the victims. They are the victims. He was using their ID, and they've put him also known as. That's pretty bad. Never convicted for murder. No, because he killed himself before it got that far. Oh dear, this is like really bad. Yeah, this is just repeating word for word that it's just repeating it word for word that I have read with the Charles Ing case. You know how Clara Lynn handed over stuff. I mean, she would. But apparently he swallowed a cyanide pill that had been sewn in his clothes, and he died 4 days later, so he didn't take a big enough dose to just bam. They thought he was having a heart attack, but it wasn't. It was cyanide poisoning. Yeah. So this is pretty much... it's not as long either, so I'm glad I went with Charles Ing. But there you go, guys. Another Thriller Thursday completed, and I hope you've enjoyed this story. Let me know down below what you think. Two disgusting individuals. So any suggestions on who you would like to have a true crime episode on, let me know in the comments, because I enjoy looking these weird people up. I am going to do a kind of a death row, who the person is, what they did to get on death row, and their last meal, because I think that's quite interesting, what people choose for their last meals. So I'll be doing that in a future episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've got some of your project done, and I shall see you in another video very soon. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I hope you've enjoyed the true crime episode of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Two disgusting individuals. They've definitely done more. But anyway, yeah, I shall let you get on with your day. Please stay safe. The UK are in a lockdown, so don't go anywhere. Stay home. If you enjoy my true crime episodes or any of my videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I would love to have you join me. If you enjoyed this video in particular, please give me a thumbs up, and I shall speak to you soon, guys. I will let you get on with your day. Thank you. Lots of love, lots of hugs, and lots of sparkles to you all. Bye, guys.